All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome and thanks to everyone joining us for today's webinar, High Risk Trends for 2021 and Beyond, presented by LegitScript and Infinicept. This webinar is based on our really popular Top 10 High Risk Trends Guide, where every year or so we take a look at the trends that we see coming down the pipeline, and then we share them with you. We've got some wonderful experts with us today. Dina Rich, co-founder and co-CEO of Infinicept, is a highly respected payments industry professional with unparalleled risk, operations, and compliance experience. In 2004, she founded Dina Rich Consulting, Inc., providing strategic management services to the payments industry. The company helped clients understand their risk tolerances, recognize their vulnerabilities, initiate effective procedures to manage exposures, and implement the right risk policies, processes, and systems. And then in 2014, Dina co-founded Infinicept, combining her consulting experience with SaaS-based software that allows payment facilitators to get up and running in weeks, not years. Dina, good day to you, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me here today.
Absolutely. And we also have with us Domenica Bell, Senior Analyst on LegitScript's Merchant Monitoring team. Domenica does a little bit of everything, analyzing merchants, reviewing other analysts' work, and serving as a contract lead for one of LegitScript's merchant monitoring partners. And she also worked as a multilingual analyst on LegitScript's platform monitoring team, where she helped with monitoring in Portuguese, Spanish, and Italian. Domenica, a good day to you as well.
Good morning, David. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today.
Oh, we're excited to have you. It's good to hear your voice. It's been a while. And my name is David Califf. I serve as communications and PR manager at LegitScript. Before LegitScript, I worked in journalism and higher education and started at the company as an investigative analyst, supporting LegitScript's in-depth projects and reports. One quick note to our audience: feel free to ask questions using the questions tab that you should see on your screen. We'll get to those either as we go along or possibly save them for the end when we will have some time for Q&A. Most of you know us at LegitScript. We work with major payment service providers to monitor their portfolios for dozens of high-risk categories. We use a combination of advanced algorithms and human insight, and as part of that, our team of analysts is reviewing thousands of merchant websites daily. Our unique knowledge ecosystem gives us a really unique insight into understanding cybercrime and identifying high-risk trends. In order to stay ahead of bad actors, it's really critical to have a multi-dimensional understanding of the internet and e-commerce. Because our clients include government agencies, internet platforms, acquirers, payment service providers, and more, we have a really unique, broad visibility into the online and payments landscapes that quickly allow us to identify trends and stop illicit activity. LegitScript merchant monitoring services are comprehensive, accurate, and fast. They include everything from content violations, transaction laundering detection, regulatory monitoring, test buys, and if needed, deep dive analyses reporting. We have a team of experts dedicated to identifying transaction laundering, and they follow threads of data to identify clusters of violative merchants and discourage them from reoffending in our partners' portfolios. We not only proactively monitor for surface level transaction laundering methods, but also use our expertise to deep dive into complex transaction laundering networks and schemes. As you can see here, LegitScript monitoring encompasses more than 60 high-risk areas with some form of monitoring in more than 100 countries and more than 15 languages. Dominica already has 3 of them covered. We don't just do pharma. Our expertise extends to all forms of high-risk businesses, including gambling, hate groups, IP infringement, binary options, and we're adding new ones all the time. For example, back in January, we began actively monitoring for scams, fraud, and other violations related to the coronavirus pandemic. This is relevant to our discussion today because although the trends we're going to talk about are not directly related to COVID-19, you'll see that the pandemic has really had a ripple effect across a number of industries and is having an indirect impact as high-risk merchants and cyber criminals have been pivoting because of it. LegitScript has the pleasure of presenting today with Infinicept, which is a platform that provides all of the payments infrastructure and expert advisory services needed for payment facilitators to get up and running in weeks. Infinicept combines an innovative software solution with leading industry expertise, allowing software companies to quickly and efficiently become payment facilitators. Infinicept helps companies take charge of payment acceptance by offering some great resources. Their platform provides payment facilitators with the tools they need to operate at scale, including an automated underwriting platform and a comprehensive suite of merchant management and risk mitigation tools. Before we get into the high-risk trends themselves, let's take a brief look at the payment facilitator model. And I'm going to bring Dina in here. Dina, describe for us how a company can benefit from embedding payments and becoming a payment facilitator.
Sure. Obviously, I think it's a wonderful choice for software companies, ISVs, to make. When they're able to embed payments into their solution, they are able to control the experience of their clients in a much better way. Take, for example, a payment facilitator that provides services for people who are running races. So they might build the website, they might put a place for the runner to sign up, they might do many things. But when they don't control the payment experience by embedding it within their software, that merchant or that business has to go find a merchant account, and it's a future service. So it frightens many ISOs or banks. They don't want to do future services, but when the software company specializes in that vertical, they know the risks much better than a bank or ISO ever could. So by embedding those payments, they then are able to control that risk and know that risk, and actually also reduce the risk for their acquirer, for their sponsor, which is a benefit. They're also able to create additional revenue because the payments being part of who they are gives them more revenue than when they're just referring out those merchant accounts. Also, the product that they're delivering to their client is seamless. They're not doing a hopscotch over to a different payments product. It is the product that it is all in one. So it really creates a seamless, lower risk ability to provide payments, lower risk to them and their acquirer.
Thanks. Now, I know there are also some important considerations a company should think about before jumping into the payment facilitator model. What are those?
You know, it's fun working with payment facilitators. As you know, as you mentioned in the beginning, I've dedicated the last 10 years of my career to payment facilitators and been near or around them for 20 years. So what's really exciting about them is you are taking tech providers or entrepreneurs who found a gap or see a problem and solve it, and now they're adding payments. So one of the learnings for those entrepreneurs is about the risk mitigation. They're not used to having to underwrite merchants, and by that I mean they're not used to vetting their clients in the way the payments industry has to vet a merchant. So they have to learn that. So it's a little foreign to them. They also have to learn about ongoing monitoring and how that fits in with AML, anti-money laundering, which we hear a lot in this industry, and it's it makes people take a step back. So they just need to learn it. They just need to work with people that can help them understand how a lot of this isn't as hard as it sounds, and they just need to learn what is out there that might take advantage of them or who the bad guys are so they don't allow them into the system. And then they need to learn how to continue to monitor.
Thanks. All good things to be aware of. Now let's go ahead and move ahead to the good stuff. Today we're going to look at 6 high-risk trends you'll want to know about for 2021 and beyond. Stay through until the end of the webinar because we have a special offering for everyone today, our newly updated top 10 high-risk trends guide, which goes into detail about not only these trends that we're talking about today, but also some others that we won't have time to get into. One thing, as I mentioned earlier, we're not talking directly about COVID-19 cybercrime today. However, the pandemic, as I mentioned, has really created a ripple effect that is touching all sorts of industries, including many that we'll discuss today. Even once the worst of the pandemic is past us, which fingers crossed, I hope is soon, there's this long tail that will continue to affect industries of all sorts. And that's a lot of what we're starting to see and expect to see as far as trends in the coming year. Oh, and by the way, we did a great webinar earlier this year on COVID-19 cybercrime. And if you'd like to see it, just type COVID in the question box or the chat box, and we'll have someone follow up with a link for you after this webinar so you can watch that one as well, COVID as your link. So trend number 1 here, fake job listings and resume repair services. Domenica, tell us a little bit about what these are exactly, why they're risky, and why we've seen them trending.
Sure. So for this first trend, we're already spoiling the surprise that they're fake, but the issue here is really identifying what makes them fake, and how can you recognize the deceptive marketing, which is really the problem in this first one. So that's not to say that every job listing website poses elevated risk, or any like resume repair websites may pose elevated risk in their merchant accounts. It's really in the next slide, we'll go over some red flags that will help you identify any elevated risk and how they really have been cashing in on the desperation of job losses and unemployment with the pandemic. So in the next slide, we have an example of a merchant that the FTC called out last year in 2019 for fake job openings. And what they were doing was that they were actually just pocketing people's money by advertising these very high paying positions that simply just did not exist. So, I mean, if you think about the pandemic and the unemployment level at this point, this has really taken on a lot of fraudsters and criminals just really trying to capitalize on the desperation of people. And so even though, like David mentioned, this is not about the pandemic, we have seen all of these 6 trends that we'll be talking about today really being impacted by this trickle effect. And so just to share a couple of red flags to watch out for these merchants in specific would be, first, they advertise high-paying positions up front. So this is not really something legit companies will do normally. You don't see them really targeting like, oh, apply for this $2,000 position without really giving you much background on what the position is. In fact, they actually charge people to access the job posting. So that's a big no-no. If it seems too good to be true, it probably is. And in this case, they will have a generic looking website like this one we have on the image. They use this like really generic template where you can see that it's just like a copy and paste. The images don't really seem like real employees or Another thing that's really easy to verify is just doing a quick search on their phone number. You may see negative reviews popping up, and you know, the reviews will say clearly, oh, I paid for this service, I never received you know, reviews to my resume, or I never received the job listings, or I applied and I never heard back, things like that. They'll often also use implied endorsements by well-known brands, companies, or celebrities to really give that false sense of legitimacy to their company. And like I said, the FTC has really been focusing on deceptive marketing. This is only one example of it, but they have been constantly going after these merchants, and the fines are very heavy. Yeah, so that's what I have for the first one.
Thanks, Domenica. So it wasn't Bill Gates trying to recruit me for that job. Too bad.
No, and I'm sure Kim Kardashian will not endorse, you know, these resume repairs.
Dina, anything you want to say about these types of merchants from your perspective, or other types of consumer services?
Sure. So, and by the way, I'm not sure that Kim Kardashian sure does endorse a lot of things I would. You know, one of the things that I would like to say on something like this is, if you have a payment facilitator who is taking any type of merchant online, you do want to make sure that they understand how to underwrite properly, and that they're properly aligned with companies that can help them ferret this type of stuff out. So it's really important to know, because these bad headhunters, of course, these fake headhunters, their job is to gather information and go open merchant accounts somewhere else with those fake identities they now have, because they've gathered all this fake information. But what I want to point out is, if the payment facilitator specializes in job listing type websites, they might be able to provide extra protection that you wouldn't have expected by the one, or that you wouldn't get with the payment facilitator that does more of the horizontal. So when you look at some services that can be high risk when they're just out in the wild, they become less high risk when the payment facilitator has a specialty within that vertical.
Yeah, that's a great point. I hadn't thought of that. Wonderful. Let's move on to trend number 2, telemedicine. You know, telemedicine has been around for years, but we've really seen interest in telemedicine spike this year. Domenica, tell us about this trend and why telemedicine is tricky and trending.
Sure. Yeah, so telemedicine, I mean, we define telemedicine as merchants offering mail, phone, and or internet-based medical services. Think about the pandemic, we noticed the surge really around March, which coincides with the lockdowns. Medical offices closing for in-person consultations, and then these providers had to quickly set up a sort of remote appointment system, right? So they had to create or join a platform or somehow offer these services. However, the tricky part is telemedicine is really regulated at the state and federal level in the US. It has very tricky laws and regulations around the world, especially when you think about the kind of medication that these providers are prescribing. So we know that there is an issue with opioids and controlled substances. So how do you safely provide these services being compliant with the laws and regulations where the provider is located, but also where the patient is located? So that is extremely tricky. And if the provider is not aware, they could knowingly be violating these laws, or unknowingly as well, which we'll go over in the next slide. So the FDA, I mean, of course, with the pandemic, this has been more on the spotlight. But again, this has been a concern prior to that. So this merchant we have on the screen was called out. They were offering abortion services via telemedicine. and prescribing medication for abortion. And this type of drugs, according to the FDA, they cannot be dispensed in a regular pharmacy. And so in order to go around that, the provider actually started offering these foreign abortion drugs, which are in fact unapproved prescription only drugs in the US. And so that is a violation of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. It can trigger regulatory action, and payment processors can also get fined for onboarding merchants that are violating these laws. And again, this could be a mistake, but it could be knowingly as well, because we see a mix of legitimate providers and also just bad guys trying to sell these medications. Or, for COVID, we've been seeing a lot of COVID related testing or check-ins and things like that, screening or checkups, which may also pose elevated risk on top of the regular medical services. So yeah, it's really tricky, and that's why LegitScript offers certification services for telemedicine providers, which would ensure that when you're onboarding your merchants, that this process is quicker and you know that they are compliant.
Thanks, Domenica. Dina, what are some other considerations for payment facilitators around telemedicine?
Sure, thanks. Funny enough, at one point I would have said, well, if you're doing telemedicine, you can't be in a payment facilitator because that's not allowed by Visa's rules, or if you're calling telemedicine an online pharmacy. So you wouldn't then be able to be in a payment facilitator. But that rule has changed. It changed very recently, and a lot to do with the pandemic. Because so much went online, Visa realized that that rule was stopping the world from moving forward with getting medicines online, which was really the only way they could right now. It's of course loosening up. So their rule has changed, and online pharmacies now can be in payment facilitators. And what I'm starting to see are payment facilitators dedicated, you're going to hear a theme, dedicated to that vertical. So when they work with companies like LegitScript in certifying their sub-merchants and making sure they are real, they are then able to take LegitScript's knowledge and their knowledge and the product that they're providing, that online or that online service, and really provide a great service to the consumer and not offer bad drugs or illegal drugs. So I thank Visa for seeing that. I think it was really just Johnny on the spot of them, and for a company that big to move that quickly is really a positive.
Yeah, that is a significant change. Let's move on to trend number 3 here, illicit internet protocol television, or IPTV. Many of us have our own streaming systems, and when I'm not working, I'm streaming TV because there is nothing else to do in life right now. Domenica, what is IPTV and why is it trending?
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of the hottest topics, I would say, in terms of high risk trends that we see on a daily basis, not just for the service itself, which poses tremendous risk for the rights holders and piracy, but also we see this a lot in transaction laundering too, where sometimes we'll see the violative illicit IPTV website, and they'll be very clear, like, oh, we've had issues with our credit card processing company, and so please, transfer to this bank account, or they'll use Bitcoin and things like that. And so it's not uncommon for that same merchant to try to re-enter our clients' portfolios under the disguise of something innocuous, and use that innocuous website to actually process payments for the IPTV. And so that's like the underlying risk with these, on top of the piracy, which, I mean, it's such a loss to the entertainment industry, as much as $5 billion every year. And this is on both Visa and MasterCard's prohibited list because of copyright infringement. We all know how much cable costs and how much streaming costs. We all love our shows. We are at home in the pandemic. We want to be able to watch everything. But when we see these websites offering, you know, all premium channels, sports, adult channels, HBO, pay-per-view, you get what I mean. For $15 a month, I mean, that's just not true. It's not possible. So that's like really what we're looking for. It's a combination of the offerings in terms of the streaming services, the equipment that they're offering, because sometimes they'll be offering both or just one or the other, but they'll use common language like cut the cord, jailbroken for the equipment, and ditch cable and things like that. And so again, it's the infringement risk, because that triggers fines, but then there's also the underlying risk of transaction laundering, and it's something we see very often. And I think there is like not just a misunderstanding, but maybe wishful thinking to think that this is like a dark web sort of offering, but it's really not. It's really common. It's at consumers' fingertips, literally, to access all these, and it poses, I mean, tremendous risk all around.
And one thing to differentiate, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can see sometimes two different types of this infringement, sometimes as like a streaming service, and other times as like preloaded like boxes or some kind of technology. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. So the jailbroken language that they use usually refers to the equipment. So they'll be selling the box or the Fire Stick, and that's jailbroken, meaning that it comes preloaded with all of this content, or so they say. Or you can buy the service, the streaming service alone, and they'll like say that they'll send you a code or like something like that, so you can access online through your computer or any you know, phones or tablets or whatever.
Yeah. Dina, what about you? Anything you want to throw in about intellectual property or IPTV?
You know, the transaction laundering piece, and I'm imagining the people that have joined us today understand the definition of transaction laundering, but it's the acceptance of those, I think you called it an innocuous website, sort of that bank page, if you will, or that fake website, that I just, as people are underwriting, and the payment facilitators who might be new to this in the vertical market, the thing to think about is if the page is too bland or doesn't make sense or isn't really selling something, you can't pick a size for clothes, so many things we can talk about there. You need to double click down, because it probably is a transaction laundering site or that fake page that they're going to then push the illegal sale through. And a lot of the things you're going to talk about would fall into this category as we continue through the webinar. So if we have acquirers on the line, I will say the best part about vertical payment facilitators is things like this aren't as big of a problem as they are in the horizontal. So with the horizontal, you have to make sure they're partnering with companies like LegitScript to ensure that they're really understanding all the websites they're signing up, or they're partnering like with companies like Infinicept to make sure they really know how to underwrite, because they're a horizontal payment facilitator.
You make a great point about that transaction laundering. I know for IPTV in particular, we frequently see websites offering like computer services for a subscription, and it's just very generic, and you're paying $15 a month for computer services, and that's always a big red flag when it's just very generic and bare bones, and usually lots of typos as well.
Right? That would always.
Yes, they look for sure very professional. I would add on to that, another common one we see is like hosting, VPN, when they're in fact offering or processing the payments for IPTV. And that's the sort of thing that we point out to our clients, but we don't have access to the transaction volume. So if you're on the side of the payment processor and you can see that the volume of transaction is not coherent with the content on the face value of the website, then that's a huge red flag.
You know, that will be throughout all of the things that we look at here, that volume not matching the traffic. And for the people on listening to us today, services like Alexa Data and I think it's SimilarWeb can help you with that traffic. So even if you think, well, how do I know what traffic is on the site? It's actually not hard to see how much they have and where it's coming from.
Yeah, that's a great point. Let's move on to trend number 4, negative option billing. It's a perennial high-risk activity, but one that we've seen trending lately. Domenica, explain to those who might not know what it is, a little bit about it, and then why it's something at this point in time that's especially important to watch out for.
Sure. So this one actually falls into the deceptive marketing area in its own way too. Negative option billing is also known as continuity marketing, and it's basically an approach that deceives not merchants, the clients, into signing up for ongoing subscriptions without their express consent. So in this case, the consumer's failure to reject the offer or cancel the agreement is interpreted as a confirmation that they want to be signed up for these recurring charges. And it really poses elevated risk for chargebacks, card brand scrutiny, and regulatory scrutiny as well, as we'll see on the next slide. This is a very common template we see for negative option. The products that they usually sell are cosmetics and supplements. Again, it's not limited to that. It's just what we see most often. And they'll have this template where it's very like, I get a sense of desperation out of these because it's like, rush, if you don't enter your credit card information right now, you're gonna miss this really good deal. And it's not true because they just copy the template and they change the product. And they use the same images. It's like the eyes. I always see those eyes and it's like, oh, use this cream and it's like better than Botox. It's not true. You don't even know what's in the cream, you know, but you're just mindlessly browsing online and you see this website and it's so easy to just enter your credit card information. It's so easy. It's a click of a button away. And then suddenly you're enrolled into this trial and you keep getting charged $90 a month. And they make it so hard to cancel. Sometimes the phone number that they give you doesn't work, or the terms to cancel are so confusing that it doesn't even make sense. It's like cancel 3 months before 2 weeks on like a business day. It's like ridiculous. So they
only in a full moon. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like, no, they don't want you to cancel. They want to keep charging you. And so this has been on the FTC's radar this past year. We've seen an increase in this sort of regulatory scrutiny for those. And it's really just a misleading, deceptive trend. And again, we don't know what's going on the background, you know, how these are all related, but they do have this resemblance of the template. And, you know, it's just awful. And Congress has also stepped in and stated that it's illegal for merchants to sell online using a negative option feature unless certain conditions are met regarding transparency, informed consent, and easy cancellation practices. The FTC also recently highlighted this practice as a major focus of enforcement for them. So if I had to share a couple red flags for folks who are listening right now, I would say, again, watch out for this template. It's very common. Like little information, be wary of missing unclear or complex billing terms. And then like after the customer signs up, like I said, it's really hard to cancel. And we've seen a lot of fines coming in. So the credit card companies have been, you know, also facing fines, and just onboarding these merchants is just tricky overall.
I love how you describe the whiff of desperation. To me, they're like a needy friend. Like when you're trying to navigate away from the page, they're like, "Wait, don't go. Are you sure?"
Yeah. Yes, they do have these pop-up windows like, are you sure you want to leave? Please go back and just put your credit card
Wait,
information.
I love you.
Um,
Yeah, that's
and
great.
yeah, and something else I forgot to mention, they also use a lot of celebrities endorsements as well. We see a lot of, it's really funny, we see a lot of Shark Tank for some
Mm.
reason. It's like, oh, this miracle cream that was just presented at Shark Tank and it's gonna get rid of all of your wrinkles and it's better than Botox. So yeah, I mean, it goes back to the first topic in deceptive marketing, and to me, it's just like calls out for desperation.
Yeah. Dina, anything you'd like to add?
Well, first, thank you for the laughs. I love the desperation piece. And I learning how to do proper underwriting for the payment facilitators that are new, it's easy to see that these are bad. If you specialize in negative option, oh my gosh, I'm not sure why we even need it anymore in our world, but there it sits and we have to deal with it. So as a payment facilitator, know that the card brands highly regulate it and they will watch for it. And you have lots of things you have to do around how you notify when you're doing your recurring billing, how you notify that the recurring billing is going to happen, and that if you do recurring billing such as this, you're probably going to get in chargeback programs.
Mhm.
So if you pay closer attention to this and really understand what you're getting into, you might make different decisions. Because, by the way, if a cream really were better than Botox, I think those would shut down.
Good point. Yes, truth in advertising. I always got to consider that. One other thing I should mention too, if you're interested in learning more about negative option billing, well, we have a dedicated guide on that. So in the question field, you can just type negative option and someone will reach out to you with that guide. Again, just type in negative option. Trend number 5, Kratom. This is kind of a bonus trend because it did not make our top 10 high risk trends guide. It was our number 11 and just missed out. So we thought it would be fun to address it in our webinar. Domenica, tell us about what this is.
Yeah, again, this is a really common one. I feel like I see merchants offering Kratom almost on a daily basis on just a regular workflow. So Kratom is like misinterpreted as being safe because it's a plant. It's a tree that grows naturally in Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia. It's usually sold online in powder form or tea capsules. Sometimes they try to get away with selling kratom soap, uh, which we know what they're doing. But it's tricky because it's been labeled as a drug of concern by the DEA. It's a controlled substance in several countries, and it's also been banned in several US states. For example, Arkansas, Indiana, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. And so on the next slide, we'll see that this alone, I mean, it poses a major um, major risk for processing payments for this substance. It may violate the rules of major card brands and payment facilitators because even though it's not controlled, it hasn't been scheduled at the federal level, it is being marketed and it is being used as providing the same effect of an illegal drug. And again, like I said, because it's a plant, there's this like idea that it's safe and it's a natural alternative and it's a natural supplement. So, it's fine for you to take this capsule and treat your opioid addiction or your opioid withdrawal, which is the marketing that we see most commonly. So these buzzwords that create this perception that kratom is safe, it's really dangerous. The FDA has reported over 40 deaths associated with kratom use, and side effects actually include seizures, liver damage, and withdrawal symptoms. So it's being marketed as a withdrawal aid, but it causes withdrawal symptoms, and it's not, there's no medical, the bottom line is the FDA has not approved kratom for any medical use at this time.
Mm. Dina, how should payment facilitators approach merchants who are selling products that may have unfamiliar ingredients or be unfamiliar products like this?
you know, this falls under the entire nutraceutical header, and it's really something you have to be careful of, and you can't make any medical promises on products that aren't truly substantiated, and if they are, they're probably not going to be sold on a website. They're probably going to be sold differently. So I'm always suspect of anything on the internet that promises that it's going to fix me, make me feel better, reduce some other addiction that I may have. So when you are a payment facilitator and you are allowing the sale of supplements through your submerchants, again, I sound like a little bit of a commercial, but you better partner with somebody so that, or have a specialist on staff so that you know that the ingredients that are within those products are okay. And this is bigger than just Kratom, it's all of those supplements, because there are so many very legally unclear supplements out there. So be careful. And again, this is why I like the vertically focused payment facilitators. It's easier for them to know what they are selling. And if you are vertically focused and this is within your vertical, you'll probably know it better than other people. And then that makes a big difference.
Yeah. Awesome. And we've got finally trend number 6, multi-level marketing. Not a new business model by any means, but boy, has it changed. I've seen MLMs for solar panels, coffee, and no joke, yoga pants. So Dominica, tell us about multi-level marketing companies and why they've been of interest recently.
Sure. Yeah, like you said, they you think about MLM companies from the past, you're thinking about supplements or essential oils, but now we're seeing like such a diversified product offering. Like you said, yoga pants, kitchen gadgets, software, consulting, you name it, it's everywhere. And they are not only opening up the scope of the product itself, they're actually being very careful with the language that they use. And so sometimes it's tricky to point out to that buy-in option, which is really what we're looking for. And so what they actually started doing, and they've been receiving regulatory action on, is making problematic healthcare claims, especially about COVID. So we see several essential oils, making like antiviral claims and specifically claiming to prevent COVID or treat COVID or diagnose in a way COVID. And it's really risky for the consumers. It's risky for the payment processing, and it's really what we're looking out for if for some reason we can't point out to the MLM specific language. So on the next slide, we'll see an example of one of the many FTC warning letters. Again, this merchant was making COVID-19 claims to treat the disease, and we're really looking for that not just on the merchant's website, like the actual company's website, but the distributors also, and on social media, which they tend to be a bit more free in terms of language in social media, but we also look out for that. And so on top of the risk associated with being a possible illegal pyramid scheme, where we're looking for the earnings marketing, right? They tend to market like incredible earnings. And again, that falls into the desperation of people looking for jobs right now with the pandemic. And so the FTC is not really only looking for healthcare claims. They've also been looking at problematic claims in terms of earnings associated with pyramid scheme type of business, especially due to the unemployment levels right now.
Yeah, so you've got kind of a double danger there, both potential health claims and earning claims issues.
Exactly.
Dina, what's your experience with MLMs?
It's all over the board, right? There are some good MLMs out there. However, the majority of them, as we've seen through recent FTC cases, as well as some DOJ cases, The majority of them aren't good. So the thing to pay attention to when you're underwriting an MLM specifically is how the money is made. And if the money is made only by bringing in other people beneath them, not so much for selling the product, that's a big red flag. If there are high requirements or strong requirements that you have to buy more inventory than you otherwise would be selling on a periodic basis, so maybe monthly you have to buy $1,000 worth of inventory, whether you've sold anything or not, that's a red flag. So there are certain red flags in the MLM world that let you know it's bad. And the other thing I'd point out is some of the pieces that, or some of the things we've spoken about today can be hidden in MLM sales as well. So everything above you need to think about when you're underwriting the MLM. Just be extra careful, really read those blogs, really understand their reputation, because this is really going to tell you whether you've got an MLM that's harming consumers or an MLM that is doing the old Amway type MLM job.
Mm. Yeah, and if you're an MLM selling Kratom at a negative option cycle, then just watch out. You're gonna be in trouble. I see a question about cannabis, federal laws versus state laws from Hans. That's a great question. We actually have a guide that talks about that, so I'll have someone get in touch with you after our webinar here to talk a little bit more in depth about that. Those are some of our high-risk trends for the coming year. In a minute, we'll give you a link to the full guide to download. A lot of these trends deal with industries that are not only highly regulated, but also complex and difficult to understand. But what's even more challenging is that there may be frequent regulatory changes or updated card brand rules that you've got to keep on top of as well. There are also some key ways that you can mitigate your risk going into 2021 and beyond. And we believe one of the best ways is to join with partners who really understand this space. Let's look at some of the solutions that can help you mitigate your risk. Dina, tell us first a bit about the value of good underwriting.
Sure. So you can't be in this industry without understanding how to underwrite your sub-merchants or your merchants. To know who you are moving money for is the base, right? So we have experts here at Infinicept where we help you understand the risk level in your vertical or in the type of processing you are looking to do, because they all carry different risks. We'll help you build an underwriting policy and procedure that works with that. And if you even wanted to use our software, of course, we can help dial in that software to match where your risk level is on the underwriting side. We partner with companies like LegitScript in order to make sure that you have that ongoing monitoring, because you cannot be on the internet without that, without knowing. So there's so many different pieces here for underwriting. And by the way, it's not all auto underwriting, as some people might lead you to believe. You want to be able to have a certain piece that's automated, but then you need to know when to bring your experts in. And when you're in different verticals, you need different types of experts, and you need to understand that and have them on your staff and able to help you. And that, and actually, if you pop to the next slide, that really is the automated risk monitoring piece that you need to think about after you have done the underwriting and they've started to process. You also need to be able to know when what they're doing doesn't match up. We talked about bank sites and transaction laundering. One of the ways you figure that out is by matching up what you see happening with what you expected to happen. And what I will also say is one of the things you have to know most is how to use that internet to your advantage, how to continually follow the blogs that might talk about different merchants or reputation, or even their Facebook, what's happening on their Facebook pages and what are people saying about them. There are so many things, but most importantly, when you are accepting merchants who process on the internet, you must partner with somebody like LegitScript. And the merchant monitoring piece which is next up, is one of the more important pieces for you to think about when you are processing online.
Good segue. We believe that having a robust merchant monitoring solution really helps you to quickly identify merchants presenting risk and allows you to take action before it results in card brand fines. But it's important to know that not all merchant monitoring solutions are built the same. We use robust algorithms, but it's paired with expert human insight, meaning that a human analyst reviews every flagged merchant before we send it to you, which gives you a detailed note about why we flagged it. And that means you're getting actionable information and effectively zero false positives, which is so important because so much of what we hear is people having a merchant monitoring solution, but spending hours and hours a day trying to go through all of these flagged merchants and not knowing why they're flagged and having to figure it out. So our analysts go beyond a merchant's website, and we conduct open source research across the internet to uncover risky business affiliations and suspicious practices. We don't just review a merchant's website. We look at business registrations, marketing on social media, contact information, domain name system information, things like that to see if the merchant is connected to any undeclared risky businesses. As you can see, there's another negative option billing page with her scary dead eyes and the credit card form there. This degree of highly skilled in-depth monitoring just really isn't offered elsewhere, and it's especially difficult to implement in-house because it requires lots of time and really massive resources. So some solutions there for you. Those are some ways you can mitigate your risk amid these high-risk trends. We have just a few minutes here for questions, so if you have any, type them in now in the question box. While we give you time to think about those or type those in, we wanted to point you to our full high-risk trends guide, the top 10 high-risk trends that put you at risk of BRAM and GBPP fines. We only got to about half of them today in this webinar, so there's more to read and learn about. The guide has another 5 we didn't get to, so you can get that at legitscript.com/trends-guide. In addition to all 10 trends, it includes case studies, key principles, links to other guides, and more. So again, you can get that now at legitscript.com/trends-guide. And Infinicept also has a wonderful resource center, including a number of white papers about becoming a payment facilitator. You can download those at infinicept.com/resources. Topics include how software companies fit into the payments revenue food chain and how becoming a payment facilitator improves a merchant's experience. Again, that's at infinicept.com/resources. So any questions now, feel free to type it in. I'm going to go back real quick to one of the questions we got about cannabis. Is that something, Dina, that you work with at all and have any familiarity with?
So we do have some specialization in that field. However, I am not the person that carries that. And because it is so detailed, I am not comfortable speaking about it, but I'm happy to jump on calls after or set something up afterwards.
Great, thanks. And likewise, we have some regulatory experts who follow those trends, and I know the complexity of cannabis makes it really difficult, especially since it's still considered a controlled substance at the federal level, even though a number of states and even more since the recent election have legalized it. And so it becomes just a really murky, complex area. But we've got some guides and some experts that we can put you in touch with. Any other questions anyone else would like to ask before we wrap up here? It looks like that's all we have. Well, again, we've got guides at legitscript.com/trends-guide and resources at infinicept.com/resources. A huge thanks today to Dina and Domenica and all of you who have joined us today. We always appreciate sharing our content with you, so we hope to see you more in the future. Good day to all of you. Bye-bye.